So this video then is going to look at the values of the Olympic Games, and I want you to think back to your knowledge of Baron Pierre de Coubertin and when the modern Olympic Games were introduced. So we're talking about the back end of the 1800s, and that of course was a time of high Victorian values. So just before we move on in the video, I'd like you to pause in a moment and have a think about what it is that you imagine Pierre de Coubertin's values of the Olympic Games would have been. What would he have been thinking about when he started, when he had an idea of what these Olympic Games would stand for? So pause just now and see if you can think of at least 3 or 4 values for the Olympic Games. Pause now and we'll carry on in just a moment. Okay, so let's look at those values then. And there are 5 or 6, 7 I think in all that we need to get our heads around. The first of which is excellence, and we'll look at each of those in a moment and discuss them a little bit more. But the first one is excellence, the second one is respect, third is inspiration, then equality, determination, friendship, and courage. And we're going to take a little moment to look at each of those and just make sure we've got a head around what they mean and see if we can give some examples to each of those as well. So excellence, as you might expect, is this idea of aiming to do the very, very best you can to achieve your absolute potential and achieve the best you can in this highly competitive situation. Respect is about respect for other competitors, for other countries, and for the cultures from other countries as well. And of course, the respect for the sport. We could also add in there respect for officials as well. Inspiration is about this idea of competitors being role models for the next generation, so they're inspiring a generation. And I've taken that phrase there deliberately from the key logo, if you like, from, I don't mean logo, I mean slogan, from the 2012 Olympic Games, which was, if you remember, inspire a generation. So this idea that those that are competing are there, they're privileged to be there, yes, they've earned the right to be there, but they are inspiring a nation because the eyes of the world, certainly in terms of our modern era, are looking at them, and they're inspiring the next generation to participate. The idea of equality, that everybody has the opportunity to take part with an equal chance of success, no matter their race, gender and religion. That was really important and almost probably quite forward thinking towards the end of the 1800s. Determination, the value, a quality of having strength of mind and willingness to succeed. And you can imagine that by the very nature of Olympians making it to the Olympics, they would have to have a huge amount of determination in order to succeed. Friendship, camaraderie, very, very important. The idea of creating harmony by bringing competitors and spectators together from around the world. And again, if you were fortunate enough to have attended, have been to an Olympic Games, then I'm hoping that you probably would have experienced that. I certainly did with my family when I went to London 2012. And then lastly, the idea of courage, this concept of being brave to compete against the very best athletes in the world. By definition, the Olympic, and certainly if you're getting onto the podium, you are competing against the very best. And the idea of having the courage also to make personal sacrifices to achieve those goals. Really, really important. So there are our 7 values. I think the reality is you just have to learn those. You have to remember what they are: excellence, respect, inspiration, quality, determination, friendship and courage. It might be of use to you to make some kind of acronym if that might be of help to you. You might want to use the Olympic rings in some way to help you to remember those. But the type of question we've seen in the past has literally been, what are the Olympic values, and give an example of how they may have been exhibited, demonstrated at the Olympics. And that could easily be a 4 or 5 or even a 6-mark question. So something for us to get our heads around. So what I recommend you do is pause the video now and just spend a bit of time looking at those, making some notes and having a think about that before we move on to the next part of the video, which is going to be looking at examples of each of those. In fact, before we do that, why don't you have a think about an example for each of those from the Olympics that you might be aware of, that you may have seen or seen media profile, media snippets, etc. about that. Pause the video, have a think, and then we'll move on. Okay, so what I want to do is to show you some imagery, I suppose, some images to help us to just get the idea of this in a little bit more strength in our mind, so to speak. So we'll start with excellence, and if I just click here, hopefully you would have thought of the gold medal. So for me, excellence at the Olympic Games is winning gold. That's surely what each competitor ideally would be striving for. There may be exceptions, of course, especially if you're young and you're in your first Olympics and you might want to be think you've got 2 or 3 Olympics ahead of you, but ultimately that's the prize, isn't it? The Olympic gold. So excellence, Olympic gold. Now here's something really interesting. I wonder what you think of as an example when we talk about respect. So what I found was this image here. I don't know if you know what that is, if you have a think about who those 2 people are and what the situation was. But this girl, this lady here, his name is Nikki Hamblin, and she is a New Zealand athlete. She was actually a pupil at Millfield School, and this is the 5,000 metre final in the Rio 2016 Games, and about 4 laps towards the end she collided with the American athlete here. Instead of leaving her, Nikki Hamblin was absolutely fine. She wasn't injured at all. She could have just run on and left the American athlete, but she didn't. She stopped and she helped her up and made sure she was okay. And despite the fact the American athlete was injured and not being able to finish, Nikki could have done, but she decided not to, and she showed a huge amount of respect for both the athlete and for the sport itself. And after the games, or towards the end of the games, she was awarded the Dukubatan medal for the spirit of the game. So that's probably one of your best examples that you could think of there. That's the respect one. Now this one here, I wonder if you know who that person is. This is a guy called David Weir, who is a 6-time Paralympian champion. Absolutely phenomenal person, massive. I mean, it's not just this value, is it? It's determination, courage, all sorts of things. Respect, massive amount of respect for this person, and excellence as well. So he kind of epitomizes the Olympic values here, but inspiring in terms of, especially for wheelchair users, the idea of being a role model and achieving and encouraging other people in a similar situation to be able to take part and participate and to believe that they can achieve. So absolutely amazing inspiration. Equality. So I've managed to find this, the idea, as we said previously, of being able to participate no matter gender, race, religion, etc. So just reiterating that. And then determination. Obviously we're aware of Mo Farah and his achievements and what he was able to do in recent Olympic Games, and so that could be an example that you might want to use. And then we'll go on to friendship. I found this fantastic picture. I think it's fabulous. I think this is the heptathletes, male heptathletes from 2016, all coming together towards or at the end of the competition, no matter who's won or lost in this situation. I'm sure they all know each other on the global circuit anyway, but showing some real camaraderie and friendship there, which is fabulous. And then the last one was this British athlete here who, this is a couple of Olympics ago now, in a sprint, he fell, he didn't fall, he pulled a hamstring and then collapsed, and his father came and helped him cross the line because that was what he wanted to do, and so he showed great courage in completing. You can always use an example of courage being actually getting to the games in the first place. So moving forward then, what I've done just to finish off is I'm going to show you some images, and I want you to pause the video and I want you to just explain back to yourself what I've shown you and as an example of each of those. So let's just make a pause the video when you see each of these images. So don't forget to explain what this means and elaborate it as much as you can. Okay, so your last task is, without going back to any notes or going back through the video, is to identify the 7 values of the Olympic Games. I wonder if you can do that.